One single letter. That's all it took to destroy a decade of friendship between Elton John and Princess Diana. Elton later admitted it was his biggest mistake, a harsh, prideful message sent just before they went completely silent. But the most heartbreaking part, they only reconciled 6 weeks before the world changed forever, and Elton was left with one secret he never got to tell her. To understand how a bond so legendary could collapse over a few written lines, we have to travel back to where it all began. It was 1981, inside the historic walls of Windsor Castle. The occasion was Prince Andrew's 21st birthday party. The atmosphere was stiff, dripping with the rigid, centuries-old protocol of the British royal family. Elton John, already a global superstar, felt like an outsider in this world of quiet whispers and formalities. He had been asked to perform with percussionist Ray Cooper, but as he arrived, he found a surprisingly quiet, almost feeble disco. He stood there, feeling out of place, until he suddenly found himself dancing with Princess Anne, and then Queen Elizabeth herself, who was famously clutching her handbag while grooving to Bill Haley's Rock Around the Clock. Elton tried his absolute best to maintain a straight face, pretending this was a perfectly normal Tuesday night. But then, she walked in. Princess Diana. She possessed an almost magical social ease, a rare warmth that could instantly melt the coldest room. She and Elton locked eyes, immediately sensed a kindred, rebellious spirit in one another, and began pretending to dance the Charleston while laughing hysterically at how bad the disco was. In that single, joyful moment, a historic bond was forged. For the next 15 years, they were inseparable. They became the ultimate partners in crime in a world that demanded constant perfection. Diana was incredibly funny, a notorious gossip, and fiercely loyal. She would sit at dinner parties with Elton and whisper the most scandalous, indiscreet secrets, knowing she could trust him completely. They were both living under the blinding glare of the global paparazzi, both struggling with the intense pressures of their public roles, and both fighting private battles with their mental health and self-worth. They understood each other in a way almost no one else could. When Diana was lonely, she would call Elton. When Elton was struggling, Diana was there. They were rock and royalty, the perfect, glamorous alliance. But the very thing that made their friendship so intense, their shared sensitivity and deep-seated vulnerability, also made it incredibly fragile. By early 1997, the cracks began to show. Their mutual friend, the iconic fashion designer Gianni Versace, had put together a massive, high-fashion coffee table book titled Rock and Royalty. It was designed to be a brilliant, artistic celebration of music and fashion, with all proceeds from the book sales and its high-profile launch dinner going directly to the Elton John AIDS Foundation. Diana had enthusiastically agreed to write the foreword for the book and to be the guest of honor at the fundraising dinner. It was a massive win for the charity, with over $400,000 worth of tickets sold in anticipation of her arrival. But then, a package arrived at Kensington Palace. It was an advance copy of the book. As Diana flipped through the pages, her heart sank. Right next to elegant portraits of the British royal family, including Queen Elizabeth, were artistic, high-fashion photographs of completely nude male models draped in nothing but towels. Diana panicked. She was already fighting a bitter, highly public war with Buckingham Palace and Prince Charles following their highly publicized divorce. She knew that if her name was attached to a book featuring male nudity, alongside images of the Queen, her detractors would use it as ammunition to paint her as reckless and unfit. Buckingham Palace was already putting immense pressure on her to distance herself from controversial projects. Terrified of the potential fallout, Diana pulled out of the book and the charity dinner at the absolute last minute. She sent Elton a cold, terse letter explaining her decision. Elton was devastated, but more than that, he was furious. He felt personally let down. To him, the book was a work of art meant to raise money to save lives from a devastating epidemic, and Diana's sudden withdrawal felt like a betrayal of their shared mission. In his anger, Elton allowed his pride to take the wheel. He decided to write back. He didn't just write a polite response. He sent her a harsh, prideful letter, calling her out and criticizing her decision. It was a message dripping with resentment. He thought he was standing up for his foundation and his friend Gianni Versace, but in reality, he was letting his ego dictate his actions. But what if the book wasn't the real reason they stopped speaking? What if there was a darker, far more dangerous game being played in the shadows of Kensington Palace? During this exact period in late 1996 and early 1997, Princess Diana was spiraling into an abyss of extreme paranoia and isolation. She was being manipulated by journalists, her phones were being tapped, and she was convinced that her closest friends were spying on her or selling her out to the media. When she received that harsh, aggressive letter from Elton, it didn't just feel like a disagreement over a book. To her fractured, terrified mind, it looked like a calculated betrayal from one of the few people she thought she could trust. It confirmed her worst fears. So, she shut the door. The silence between them became absolute, lasting for months. Two of the most famous, beloved people on Earth, completely cut off from each other over a single, prideful exchange. For nearly a year, they lived in separate worlds, refusing to pick up the phone. Both were too stubborn, too hurt, and too surrounded by people who echoed their own anger to make the first move. They went through the motions of their high-profile lives, passing each other in the press but never speaking. It seemed like a friendship that might never recover, a tragic casualty of fame and miscommunication. Then, on July 15, 1997, the world was shocked by a horrific act of violence. Gianni Versace was shot and killed on the steps of his Miami mansion. The news sent shockwaves through the global fashion and music communities, but it hit Elton and Diana the hardest. Gianni was the bridge between them, a beloved friend who had brought them together so many times. In an instant, the petty argument over the book evaporated. The sheer weight of their grief broke the stubborn silence. Diana reached out to Elton, and Elton reached out to Diana. They realized in the face of sudden death how foolish and insignificant their feud really was. 1 week later, on July 22nd, they met at Versace's memorial service inside the breathtaking Milan Cathedral. It was a somber, highly charged atmosphere. As Elton sat in the pews, completely overwhelmed by grief and weeping openly, Diana did something that would be captured in a photograph seen by millions. She broke royal protocol, leaned over and placed her hand gently on Elton's back, whispering words of comfort to her old friend. In that single, tender gesture, the feud was officially over. The year of silence was broken not by words of apology but by a shared embrace of pure, unspoken empathy. They were back in each other's lives, promising to never let pride get in the way again. But the clock was ticking, and neither of them knew it. Exactly 6 weeks after that emotional reunion in Milan, on August 31st, 1997, Princess Diana was involved in that catastrophic car crash in the Pont de l'Alma tunnel in Paris. Just as they had finally repaired their bond, she was gone. The shock of her death shattered Elton John. He was thrust into a state of profound grief, but he was also asked to do the impossible, perform a musical tribute at her funeral at Westminster Abbey. He turned to his longtime lyricist, Bernie Taupin, and together they made the decision to rewrite the lyrics to his 1973 classic, Candle in the Wind, which had originally been written about Marilyn Monroe. Bernie changed the opening line from Goodbye Norma Jean to Goodbye England's Rose, transforming the song into a national anthem of grief. The pressure on Elton during that performance was unimaginable. The royal palace had initially resisted the idea of him performing, claiming the song was too sentimental for a royal funeral. It took a passionate plea from the Dean of Westminster to convince them that popular culture was the only way to capture the raw, modern grief of the public. As Elton sat at the piano, looking out at the royal family, the Spencer family, and knowing that over 2 billion people were watching worldwide, he knew he could not afford to make a single mistake. He later revealed that he had to put a teleprompter next to his piano because he was so terrified that his muscle memory would take over, and he would accidentally sing the original Marilyn Monroe lyrics instead of the new tribute to Diana. He played through the tears, delivering one of the most culturally significant performances in human history, a moment that raised millions of pounds for the Diana, Princess of Wales Memorial Fund. But amidst the global mourning and the record-breaking success of the song, Elton was left carrying a heavy burden. He was left with one profound secret, a deep warning that he never got the chance to tell her. During their year of silence, Elton had watched from afar as Diana made increasingly risky decisions. She had begun stripping away her official royal security detail, trying desperately to distance herself from the royal family and live a more independent life. Elton, who had navigated the dark underbelly of extreme fame for decades, knew how incredibly dangerous this was. He knew that without professional, state-level protection, she was a sitting duck for predatory paparazzi, opportunists, and the overwhelming chaos of her own celebrity. He had planned to sit her down after the dust settled from Versace's funeral and tell her as a brother that she was playing a dangerous game. He wanted to warn her that the world she was trying to navigate on her own was far more predatory than she realized, and that her attempts to find freedom were actually making her terrifyingly vulnerable. He wanted to tell her that they both needed to take a step back from the blinding lights before it was too late. But he waited. He thought they had time. He thought there would be another dinner, another quiet moment away from the cameras to have that difficult conversation. That was his ultimate, quiet regret. Not just the prideful letter that cost them a year of friendship, but the unspoken warning he kept to himself, believing tomorrow was guaranteed. This tragic story serves as a stark, universal warning about the psychology of pride and the illusion of time. In our own lives, we often let minor disagreements, fueled by ego and miscommunication, create massive chasms between us and the people we care about. We send the harsh text, we write the angry email, we choose silent treatment over vulnerability, assuming we will always have the chance to fix it later. But as Elton John learned in the hardest way possible, time is a luxury we do not own. Today, Elton John refuses to perform that version of Candle in the Wind live. He has stated that he will only ever sing it again if Prince William or Prince Harry personally ask him to do so. To him, the song belongs to Diana, and to the memory of a beautiful, complicated, and deeply missed friendship. It stands as a permanent monument to a bond that survived the highest heights of fame, the deepest valleys of grief, and the devastating cost of a single, prideful mistake. Let it remind us to put down our pens, swallow our pride, and speak the words of love and warning to those we cherish before the music stops for good. If you want to understand more about the hidden truths and complex relationships of the royal family, click on the video on your screen right now. We dive deep into the untold stories that the palace tried to keep hidden. See you there.